a question to all of you. I'll start with you, Amine. Over the past 2 years, as we have heard from Shadi, we've seen this fall in oil prices, the impact on regional growth, and these government cutbacks, the government reform programs. How has that affected your business?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry for you ladies and gentlemen behind me here. It's a great opportunity to share with you such an issue that is driving us into especially the budget hotel sector and into also the mid-scale. As we have been leaders in the development of our brands in this category, I think this provided us a winning edge in terms of development, especially for the future.
Have you seen the sort of as people have been looking at their budgets more,
there is a shift.
They've come to the midsection?
Indeed, there is a shift here, and then definitely this has been expressed by the government in Dubai, where encouragement to investors on waiving and in supporting some of the taxation on the development of the 3- and 4-star category or the budget hotel sector. And this is just as an indicator to influence us as investing in the brands in this region. The latest acquisition also last year of Jingjiang, our Chinese conglomerate, and the investment we have from Louvre Hotel Group in the budget hotel sector in revamping our brands is also another indicator to say, yes, there is an important opportunity here with investors to look at. And this was definitely an issue we raised with the existing market.
Do you see this sort of, you mentioned the Chinese investors there, and certainly when I'm traveling in the region, you know, say to Egypt, for example, there's a lot of Chinese tourists.
We see now more Chinese travelers.
So do you think that's an important driver for...
This is an important driver indeed, and we see this shift also not only to existing markets, but also to emerging markets, you know. So we are quite motivated as such, and we take it as a positive outlook rather, you know.
Okay, and if I can move to Saudi Arabia, Badr, how has, I mean, Saudi Arabia, the biggest economy in the region, but also the biggest oil producer in the world and probably most affected by the downturn in oil prices, and with this huge reform program launched about a year ago, around the time of AHIC actually last year, how has the hospitality sector been affected over the past year or two in Saudi Arabia?
Thank you, Richard. Good morning, everybody, especially those who I'm not facing. Speaking from the point of view of Dur Hospitality, the largest developer of hotels in Saudi Arabia, we have seen the different sectors being affected, all of them being affected, but in different ways, and by different factors. The reform program definitely provides a long-term and a visionary outlook for the economy of Saudi Arabia in general, just like Shadi said, in diversifying the economy, that it's an economic program, but it also has some specific elements that affect travel and hospitality, yet it's long-term. On the short term, we have been affected negatively because of the slowdown in construction, the slowdown in government projects, and also some of the reform program elements, such as reducing the perks of government employees, affected spending of domestic travelers. This has been lately reversed 2 days ago, and we think this will have a positive effect on the short term. There was also some effects from the change in the Umrah and Hajj travelers' visa processes that also negatively affected the travelers. So if you look at it overall, you had different factors that combined together to put downward pressure on the hotel sector in Saudi Arabia.
From a sort of a long-term investment point of view, so the Vision 2030 strategy has a big element of growing religious tourists, pilgrim numbers to the holy cities. Is that where all the investment should be going, into Jeddah, into Mecca, into Medina? Is that the sort of the big growth opportunity for the hospitality sector?
The 2030 program has specific targets to increase the number of Hajj visitors from about 2 million now up to 8 million, and the Umrah travelers who are about 6 million now up to 30. It's going to be a very challenging target to meet. This definitely opens up opportunities to invest in the Hajj and Umrah religious traveler markets, including Jeddah. But there are other opportunities in Saudi Arabia relying on domestic travelers and the domestic market. You have the family and friends visits, the non-branded long stay offerings that need to be upgraded. There are also the business travelers who still have some demand that could be met. So the multiple opportunities in Saudi Arabia for the long term, not the short term, but definitely Hajj and Umrah is the most prominent.
Kind of the core of the ambition. Joe, if I can come to you, rather than repeat the same question, what's your view looking forward, do you think? We've had this kind of period of consolidation at a government level and this shift on focus towards the private non-oil sector that Shadi talked about there. What does that mean for your plans, say, over the next 5 years, which includes Expo, and maybe beyond that?
Well, I mean, what I think we're seeing at the moment, and has been well discussed already today, is as the UAE economy moves from a carbon-based to a more diverse economy, then and as Shadi said, the impact of the private sector is becoming more significant. And we're certainly seeing the opportunity there. Across our portfolio of hotels here in Dubai, certainly we've seen the price pressures. We have reacted to them to a point where, we've actually seen some slight RevPAR growth through the strategies that we and our operators.
That's quite. How have you achieved that? Because there's a lot of extra supply in the market.
There is.
Demand has fallen. So how have you managed to do that?
Well, I guess I'm sure there are others in the market that have seen that. It depends on what property you are, where your location is, what segments you're attacking, and what your competitors are doing. So, in our particular case, I think we've adopted on one particular hotel, our Fairmont on the Palm, a strategy that's allowed us to, yes, see the rate have to come back a bit, but we've more than made up for it in demand and through volume. And we've had to be a lot better in the way we package it, the markets we go after. So, we're continuing to do that. And, the things that have recently been introduced by the government through the visa on arrival programs for both the Chinese and the Russians has spurred demand from those segments. So we're seeing Russians, for example, the Russian market, coming back. Are they coming back at the price points that they used to? No. So we need to be more competitive. But we're attracting that market, and we're capturing that market again, and service them. And it's all about value these days. That's what the market wants. The Chinese traveller has also been, there's been a tremendous amount of growth in that area, and we're seeing it at the moment mostly at the lower end of the market, but I think as time goes on, we're going to see that market continue to improve, and we'll get some of that higher level. So there's a number of things that are in play at the moment.
And are you concerned at all about the new capacity coming on stream over the next 2 years? Or
always concerned. I've been in this market for into my 12th year. When I arrived here, I thought, how are we going to go from 30,000 to 60,000 rooms? As an outsider coming in, I'd never experienced such supply growth. But we've all seen, even through the GFC, we've worked our way through that supply and gone on. I mean, the amount of money that the government spend on infrastructure, on continued development of airports, roads, theme parks, and so forth, with the airlines continuing to add routes, notwithstanding the recent announcement in terms of Emirates with the US destinations. All of that just, for me, augurs well. And obviously, 2020 coming, I think there's tremendous opportunity. Sure, I think we have to be smarter about the way we go about getting our business.
What do you mean? So you touched on the theme park programs and you mentioned the airlines. So when you say smarter, what?
Well, it's all about packaging. So I think, our friends at Dubai Parks and Resorts, when they, for example, picking them, when they've opened, I think they had a pricing strategy that was aggressive. And I think they did that on the basis of, it's a high quality product. They've valued it according to comparable parks elsewhere in the world. But I think they very quickly realized that you need to actually generate the demand before you can actually, so it's a crawl, walk, run type strategy. We've seen them now in the market with very aggressive packages. Together with our operators, we've been able to put those packages in place. And now I think we can go to our markets, wherever they are in Europe or in Asia or in on the subcontinent or in Africa, and package with travel, theme park, hotel, cars and so forth, a very, very enticing model or enticing offering.
So on
the
packaging thing, I'm going to come later on, Badr, back to Saudi Arabia's theme parks. I just want to introduce Ignace into the conversation, so thank you for your patience. What are the things that you're looking at Wyndham Group for, the opportunities, but also, I guess, the risks over the next year? And I'm thinking here VAT and all the talk that we've had around associated with the reforms, governments increasing taxation and particularly VAT. I mean, so before we get on to VAT, what are you looking at as the opportunities and risks for your group?
Well, we've heard this before. I think this morning on the radio, I heard His Highness Sheikh Ahmed saying the future is East. We heard this morning also on multiple occasions, the future is East. So the demographics are changing. We have a growing middle class. If I've been reading up lately, and I think by 2030, we'll have about 5 billion middle class people. So they travel more. We have the millennials that start to travel heavily. We have the Generation Z. So all these people have different travel needs. We've seen it before this morning. So if you look east, then you're also going to look at what are people looking. So automatically, people traveling more, being budget conscious, as we've said before, is that mid-scale and economy brands are going to flourish in this part of the world, as they've done in other parts.
So for Amine, and for you talked about your positioning in the mid-scale and budget end, and Joe and Amine both mentioned Chinese travelers. So that's the competitive sector of the future, is it?
Exactly. So, but if you then look at, and I think it was in the panel before, the strength of the brand was also, so if you look at China, everybody talks about the Chinese arrivals, right? So we have if you look at budget, Super 8, one of our brands, has over 1,000 rooms in China. So bringing this to this part of the world creates connectivity. And of course, then we have all the airlines in there. So the airline connectivity is better. Due to the low oil prices, automatically we also have better rates. We have budget airlines that increase their connectivity.
Excuse me, Badr, is the Chinese conversation that we've been having here, is it different in Saudi? The conversation we just had was about religious pilgrims and increasing numbers. Are we seeing the same trends with Russian and Chinese tourists coming to Saudi? I guess we're not, but what do you think?
For Hajj and Umrah travelers, Russia and China don't stack up on the top.
They're not.
No, they're not among the top. The top travelers are usually.
So it's a slightly different dynamic that we're talking about. Yeah.
And then even for outside of the Hajj areas, mostly business travelers from Europe, from the GCC and the other Arab countries.
Okay.
So it's a different demographic.
But also from the east for the Hajj and Umrah flights and demographic, definitely Indonesia as being the largest Islamic country in the world, and seconded by the other East countries, will definitely have future travel patterns to impact demographic to the pilgrims and to Umrah.
Okay, so that's, sorry to interrupt you there, Ignace, but that was a little, I thought that was an interesting segue into...
So summarizing, I think, for the Wyndham Hotel Group is that we see big opportunity in mid-scale and economy, but we also have two other business entities, the Wyndham Vacation Ownership and the Wyndham Destination Network. So where in this part of the world, once legislation about all that will be settled, there's a massive growth of opportunity. Now, touching on the VAT, as you said, that's we've been discussing it just before we came on stage, is where there's a lot of, I would say, we're still in a gray zone. However, I would like to first zoom out on this. Look, if you look at introduction of VAT, and the word says it itself, we have a value-added tax, so it's another tax, you know. So Middle East, Africa, not all countries are the same, don't have the same tax regime. If we look at Dubai today, we have 10% municipality tax, we have 10% service charge, we have the tourist dirham, we will add what we all supposed, as we said, about 5% VAT, I'm not talking about the UAE. There's unclarity if the GCC will implement this all at the same time, so that's two speeds seem to have, but if you look at adding VAT, we zoom out and we look at the destination, we look at Middle East. If you read reports, then you see how the Middle East comes out in many of the statistics as let's say an expensive destination. Dubai in particular is always ranked in the top 5 most expensive cities of the world. Now, going to the strategy of His Highness and also His Excellency Hilal Al-Mari, where we say, okay, Dubai, we want to grow from 10 million visitors in 2010 to 20 million visitors in 2020, is how are we going to bring these people in? Again, mid-scale and economy. But then adding another tax, is that the right thing to do? Now, comparing it to the rest of the world, and I'll just jump to Europe, where we also have VAT, which is very well embedded.
But I think we've got two questions here, though, haven't we? So you're just saying, is it the right thing to do because it adds an extra cost? But we know it's coming, so there is one debate about... But
the how, I think we'll
how,
discuss
exactly.
the how, because in Europe, average, if you look at the most European countries, you have about 20% VAT. However, on the accommodation, a lot of countries make exceptions. France has 20%, but 10% on accommodation. Belgium has 21%, has 6% accommodation. Germany, 19% and 7% on accommodation. So is that the answer for us, not to become as a destination too expensive? Because Dubai, we have the leisure, we have the corporate, we have the MICE industry, we're bringing the theme parks, as Joe mentioned. But in the end, people are still looking, because it's not only us, it's not only hotels who will add VAT, but airline costs, everything will go up. So where will we go from a price point for people to visit us? I think, could it be absorbed the 10% municipality tax? We don't know. There's different visions,
so
different opinions.
Maybe if I can come to Shadi, as the non-hotelier, you're officially our VAT expert. So, and if there's anyone in the audience who, you know, this is an issue that we all know is on the horizon, so if there's anyone in the audience who has some extra to add on this conversation. But Shadi, what do we know? It's coming on the 1st of January, at least that's the promise, but not all countries, it's for the GCC, but not everyone is in the same position. How much will it be? What will it be on?
I was speaking to a panel of 150 tax experts yesterday morning, and I was being asked these same questions. So it's kind of confusing for a lot of different stakeholders in the economy as to when the VAT is coming in. But notwithstanding, I think we've heard comments from UAE policymakers pretty much ballparking it in that's going to come at the beginning of 2018. But then the question is, how do the different sectors in the economy begin to react to that? One, do we have the infrastructure in place? Two, we look at the SME sector, for example, and one of the interesting things I heard yesterday is almost 20 to 30% of SMEs actually keep books to the standards that would accommodate the introduction of VAT. So you're looking at a lot of structural deficiencies that exist. But
so there's the collection side on the government structures, and then there's the payment side on the businesses.
Yeah, absolutely, and even the readiness side on having enough qualified auditors to audit these firms, right? And the question is, again, it comes to some of, let's look at the actual application and impact on businesses of application of VAT. Now, I pointed to the PMIs, which we compile, and one interesting finding I talked about, which has been the drop in output prices. So sectors such as the tourism sector have been reacting. They've been dropping output prices. But input prices, which are costs, have actually been rising over the last year and have consistently across all sectors. Now, the way companies have been responding to that is to either let their workforces, reduce their workforces, or to try to increase the productivity out of their existing workforces, and both dynamics have been happening. One thing to keep in mind about the application of VAT on the economy and on different sectors is that margins in the UAE have been high across a lot of different sectors. The tourism sector, the retail sector in particular, actually. Now you're having margin compression happening, and you're having businesses have to deal with how to restructure themselves around working on higher productivity metric, which is a long due adjustment that needs to take place across the GCC. But it is a matter of reality. VAT is coming in, and it's all about industries responding to that.
Yeah, and I think it's very important because once you introduce GCC, VAT in the GCC, you need to make sure there's some consistency. And I was talking to Badr earlier, you know, the challenges you're facing, or the country in Saudi Arabia will be facing is also interesting because let's say, okay, UAE, we might go and we might add up and we are used to doing things at a big speed and everything will fall together. But, you know, then we have a big economy like Saudi Arabia where VAT is different.
What's the position in Saudi? Is it going to come on the 1st of January next year, do you think?
They said the first half of 2018,
Okay.
but no details yet on implementation. And as we were speaking before the panel, it's much easier to introduce in a country or a city like Dubai, where you already have mechanisms to tax or count the number of visitors and the revenue of the hotel, whereas in Saudi Arabia, there's no such mechanism in place. So you need all that infrastructure before you start taxing.
I mean, can they get? You say the first half of 2018, but that's a lot of, you know, organizations, regulations, processes to get in place, and that's just on the government side.
We as hoteliers were not in a hurry, but
You know,
how are
you know, I
prepared?
think GCC-wide we have a challenge if we're gonna really address VAT. One, we as operator, if we receive our management fees in Saudi Arabia, we have to pay taxation. Where do we treat VAT there? Two, as an investor developer, every year I have to pay zakat.
Yeah.
So how do I treat zakat also in accordance to my VAT issue?
Is there any information about this? I mean, if you want to go and ask a question, where do you go?
And what you've said, very important, is do we have auditors and do we have definitely the logistics, the infrastructures, the experts to really, once this is being implemented, is being studied and is being definitely mastered, I think we need more time. I think we need more time to change the cultural approach of such situation because we are in a great zone of, you know, having no taxation. And are we to go by? And what we say as investors when we have, and I recall the license to have a company in Dubai, let's say it used to cost so much, today it costs so much. And then why is this? Is to cover up on certain costs in relation to Chamber of Commerce, municipality, widening roads, government expenditures, and this is what we have all needed. So the VAT issue, I think, requires more as it's a very challenging situation between one country and the other.
So you've said we need more time, and I think it's evident from what I've heard and what we've been talking about here that I think that we do need more time. But officially, it's coming 1st of January in some countries, but first half of 2018 for Saudi Arabia. So let's assume that we don't have more time. What can you do about it? How are you sort of adjusting your, and maybe any of the four of you can step in here, how are you adjusting your processes to prepare for, where do you collect the money and who do you pay it to?
Exactly. Are we gonna swallow it into our organizations? Are we gonna pass it to the customer? Can the customer still afford to have an addition? And when we realize, and I'm talking here in general on the mid-scale and the budget sector, is important to address what packages we are giving. And what is the VAT gonna be
So the package thing is quite interesting because you've got several different services.
So if I have a package, and in this package, let's say I have the airline ticket, I have the airport tax, I have the import tax, I have all the related tax of traveling. Then, if I'm selling the destination, I have the travel, I have the transport, and I have the leisure, and then I have the hotel accommodation. So the lodging here is important to know, because we are, as the lodging industry, the skeleton of the tourism. And if we are definitely number one employer, and number two, we will be also number one VAT provider to government. You know, with the number of rooms we have, for instance, in Dubai or in Mecca or in Jeddah or in other cities. So, you know, this is very important that we need to have such a resolution to really draw the attention of the governments.
Joe, you talked about packages there.
Yeah, well, I was about to say, as Badr said, in Dubai at least, or in the UAE, we've got the mechanisms for collection. So we're the tax collectors at the moment, whether it's the service charge or the Dubai municipality. So I think from a collection perspective, that's going to be straightforward. I think there's a lot of uncertainty about this. One of them is, will this tax, you know, will the government mandate that the tax needs to be inclusive or exclusive? Can you sell your rates inclusive of VAT, or should it be shown like it is in many other parts of the world where it's a plus?
So how you, and this isn't aimed at you, but you're representative of everyone in the room, how are you finding out that information, what you have to do?
Well, at the moment, we're not. I don't think anybody knows what it is. The only thing I'm seeing at the moment is numerous invitations from the various large accounting firms to say, come and attend a seminar on VAT.
Do they know any? Shadi, you were just at the conference yesterday.
That's the funny part, is that they themselves have a lot of questions.
Yeah, so I think they're coming to the regulators or
So it's the blind leading the blind.
to find out, and then
Kind
they
of,
want to organise a seminar to teach their clients something that they probably don't know.
Badr, sorry, Joe.
Yes, I just wanted to add from our experience another type of tax that was introduced but then was scaled down in Saudi Arabia. When what was the Umrah and Hajj visa fees, which were increased significantly to a very big fee of about like 2,000 riyals and 3,000 riyals. That affected the number of travelers to the extent that the government changed the structure of those fees because it reduced demand. So I'm just saying that some of the reforms that were introduced have been since rolled back or scaled down.
And in Saudi, you have some other taxes coming in on expats, don't you? I don't know how this affects
That's right.
employers, but if you're a family sponsoring a family or something,
Correct.
That's going to hit the hospitality sector.
That will also affect the cost of non-Saudi workers, which will make Saudi workers in comparison more competitive. So it should affect the Saudization rates, but definitely it's going to increase the cost of staffing in hotels.
You know, this is one important factor, to a matter of fact, that we always look at when we really need to serve the local community. So localization is very important. We are not used in general in the GCC. I think Bahrain and Oman have been leaders in the localizations of our manpower, of our employment, of our talent development. And now it's coming to Saudi Arabia, and it is enforced, you know, A, on the young ladies and gentlemen, 2, on the ladies to work also, and then 3, on the culture of service to work in a hotel and to be definitely delivering an experience to a guest rather than being stiff, not a service driven. And this is very important, I think, to really capitalize upon in the future, as well as for what we as companies, we need to provide in the local community.
So we're coming to, sorry, Ignace.
No, I would like to build on that, because reading up on this, you know, today, and there was a study that was done on Dubai as such, and they didn't calculate the visa charges, you know, and housing charges and how our industry is structured of remuneration. But if everything would be taxed, the tourist development, everything included, we would be adding 25 to 30% tax on the guest's hotel bill. Now that's a lot. On top of that, the costs of doing business are also increasing. So the question, and we've seen a RevPAR decline in the majority of the GCC countries, you know, and over even Middle East and Africa region, where we see profits for owners are also coming under pressure. So then it will lead to future investment, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the cycle. Now, but if you look back on this, there's two schools. I have discussions with people that say, okay, The VAT that will come will be good for a shift, because people will say, if we add everything on the VAT, as you said, so packages, etc., there will be a shift with families, mostly the leisure people being effective. They will shift to the mid-scale and economy brands like Super 8, Wyndham Garden, Trip by Wyndham. But that's one school. The other school says, okay, no, we can absorb it, or the industry will absorb it. Another school says, no, it's going to be expensive. And that's why I said at the beginning, we need to take a step back from a destination. The Middle East is expensive, globally seen, if you look at our ADRs. But at the same time, you know, we need to look at the changing landscape, demographics, and what people ask. So it's a balancing exercise that is not so easy. It's not about just introducing VAT. It's about what will the effect be on our industry.
I mean, we're coming to the end of this conversation, but it strikes me that the hospitality sector in the GCC is reaching a sort of a maturing stage. We've had years of very high margins and high occupancy levels and development, but now we've got a lot of capacity, new customers coming from the Far East who perhaps have different price expectations, and then these new normal costs, you know, tax and localized. So is it just a structural change we're seeing, do you think, that margins are going to be?
It's evolutionary. It's happening. It is in all markets.
Maturing, yeah.
So in the long term, looking 10 years ahead, we're talking about we have to accept lower rates or rent profits.
Yeah, and this is largely an environment that's, you know, tax-free from an income tax perspective. So it's not unexpected that the government would introduce, you know, a tax mechanism that basically is a consumption tax rather than an income tax. Yeah. So, you know, most of the other developed markets have either a goods and service tax.
And is this why things like the development of theme parks and package deals and this is important, because it's about building
a destination.
And so that is it in Saudi. There's talk of the theme parks in Jeddah or near Jeddah and the entertainment city, and this is where it's going in Saudi Arabia.
There is a very huge, very big one that was introduced near Riyadh, actually, just west of Riyadh. It's a very large-scale project. It's going to take a long time. It remains to be seen the details and the effect, and whether it's going to be successful in attracting visitors from outside the country, even though I think it's more targeted toward domestic travelers. But putting that aside, Saudi Arabia offers many areas for domestic travel that needs to be developed, not requiring the cost and the infrastructure to go for this single huge theme park. The opportunity is there, it's just the government needs to focus more on it. But you still have Hajj and Umrah that is need just a very small push to increase the number of visitors.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of the time for this panel. A lot of big issues here, and hopefully we've just sort of shed a little bit of a spotlight on some of them. It's been a great discussion, and we'll be talking on all of these over the next 48 hours, I guess. So please join me in thanking your excellent panelists. Thank you, gentlemen.